Welcome back, everybody, to the Below Average Joe's MMA podcast. It's Monday. That means we're back with the MMA Weekend Recap. Dominic Salee, UFC 265 happened Saturday night. Came just as soon as it went. And
it did.
It was a great night of fights. And it's obviously, I forgot to throw in episode 127. Oh. Someone do it right there. There you go. But tell me, how are you feeling? I know you've had a long day at the pool. How's are you feeling a little burnt?
I'm going to be honest with you today. It was about an 88, 90 degree day, full sun. And I was just kind of burning to a crisp back there. But that's all right. You got to get the tan somehow. I did put suntan lotion on. No worries, right? We're trying to be protective here. But yeah, it was a good weekend, man. Another pay-per-view in the books. We're literally already a week through August. It's absolutely nuts. We're approaching the final months of 2021. But good fights, good pay-per-view, a new interim heavyweight champion to talk about. So tons to break down with you, my friend. I'm happy to start the week off with you. How was your weekend?
Well, my weekend's going pretty good because happy 1 year anniversary, Dom.
True. I guess we won't get to talk about it on the day.
Yeah, because Tuesday was this Tuesday will be 1 year since we started this podcast. So
yeah,
I'm glad to see you forgot our anniversary.
I'm so sorry.
No, I'm just kidding.
We had to restart the episode.
But feels pretty good to have done this for a year.
Yeah.
Obviously a lot of work still to be done here. We ain't satisfied yet. But no, seriously, thank you guys that have been listening or watching. No matter when you kind of got involved with us, whether it was day one or Friday.
364, yeah.
Yeah, appreciate it anyways. But besides that, weekend was good. Got to watch the fights at friend's house. Had a couple people watch them with me, so that's always nice. In case you guys probably can't tell that we're recording this episode at about 7 p.m. on Sunday. You know, usually we like to do these a little bit earlier now. Yeah. Now that time permits me to do these a little bit earlier in the day, try to do them as early as we can.
Yeah.
But Dominic, I regret to inform you that has become.
Oh boy.
There has been a wrench thrown in this.
Our production.
Yes. So I just moved apartments. I'm pretty sure I've mentioned that.
Yes.
I've been recording in the living room the last couple episodes. Now I'm in my bedroom, so like new setup. Ayo,
oh yeah.
What's going on? But problem is I when I first moved in, I would notice while I'm working, because I've been working from home, I'd be sitting there like typing away, you know. I'd be sitting like I am right here, and I would just start hearing this like loud banging noise, and it was just like over and over and over, and I'm like,
and it's no ghost, no ghost in the apartment either.
I'm like, what is that? Well, it turns out that there's a drummer living next door and one under to my apartment. So then I'm like, well, that sucks because now this guy goes for about 4 hours a day, so he's very committed. So all the respect, because hey, I if you're gonna do it, you might as well do it right. But
That's true.
It's unfortunate for me. However, what has become worse is new members to his band have been added every day. So they are now up to, I think, a quartet of rockers down there. So today they started at probably like 11 or noon, and they did not stop till about 5:30. So I got quite the show.
That's a solid session.
Electric guitar going, bass guitar going. Hell, I'm waiting for the singer.
Yeah.
As Dominic said, this is Loaded Diaper reunion tour.
Yes.
But yeah, because of that, we had to push back our recording because I don't want you guys to. I don't want to get copyright strike by the band's music playing in our episodes.
Right. Maybe they'll become our intro music band in the future.
Yeah. Dominic's always thinking 5 steps ahead.
Yes.
While I'm playing checkers, Dominic's playing chess.
Right.
But you know what we're not playing?
No. I was going to try and say something, but I'll just let you go.
Well, that's good because I don't know either. So let's talk about UFC 265. But we're going to start with fight announcements. Only one to go over here, and that's an unfortunate one. For the second time, Dominic, the fight between Sean Brady and Kevin Lee is off of that August 28th card happening in about 3 weeks. This time it's Sean Brady who's having to pull out. I believe last time it was Kevin Lee. So I guess if I'm proposing a question here for you, what do you want to see happen here? Do you like this matchup so much that you want to see it rebooked immediately, or should the focus be more so on getting Kevin Lee a matchup right now because he's had a long layoff, and maybe they go their separate ways, come back, and do the matchup later?
Yeah, I love the matchup so much because it's a great test for Brady because Kevin Lee is, fought for an interim title, been in there with the tough guys. It's a big challenge for Kevin Lee to come back after such a long hiatus, 2 knee surgeries. However, in this instance, this got announced with a little over nearly 4 weeks to go until that fight on the 28th. Try and keep Kevin Lee on that card if you can. Get him an opponent, someone at least relatively prominent in the 170-pound division. But if it just gets delayed, maybe it's not too bad of an injury from Brady. I didn't see the specifics. I wouldn't be opposed to it happening in the near future. But if you can get an opponent for Lee, I say you do it.
I completely agree. Kevin Lee's layoff, it's literally was the first card. Well, I guess technically the last card before UFC had that gap back when COVID first reared its ugly head. So, think of that. That's March 2020, early March 2020, all the way to now we're in the fall almost of 2021. It's a very long layoff, and that's a guy coming off a loss. He's moving up divisions again, going to make another crack at 170 pounds. A tough first matchup in Sean Brady. So if you're Kevin Lee, not that he would necessarily think like this, but if you're a Kevin Lee fan, maybe I should say, you should be hoping that he finds a matchup here, short notice, I should say, replacement, because it'll likely be someone not at Sean Brady's caliber. So it'll at least be more favorable for Kevin Lee to maybe get a statement win in his return to welterweight.
That's true.
While for Sean Brady, just hope he heals up. I'm not sure how serious the injury is. We saw him a lot more recently than Kevin Lee, so this shouldn't deter his path to really reaching his ceiling too much. But it is a shame because I do like the matchup. I thought it was very intriguing, but I care more about seeing Kevin Lee get a fight at this point.
Right, than forcing this one to happen. I agree.
Yes, agreed. So that's really all for our fight announcements, and we're just going to go right into UFC 265, the main event.
I mean,
man, this the headline says it all, doesn't it?
Yes.
The real deal, Ciryl Gane.
Yes, right.
So Ciryl Gane gets the TKO victory over Derrick Lewis in round 3, 4 minutes and 11 seconds. Surprisingly, the actual finish here, which I think a lot of people, and I could be wrong because this is how I viewed the 2 most likely outcomes for each side. I looked at this like you're going to either get an early knockout from Derrick Lewis or Ciryl Gane's going to outpoint to a decision.
Yep.
And I feel like that's what most people were expecting here. However, it seems like the actual finish of this fight is not really being discussed near as much as just the overall performance Ciryl Gane put on here. So not all for loss. I don't necessarily think the focus should all be on the finish. I think the overall performance was exceptional. One of the best performances of the year. Flawless. It was in some ways expected.
Yeah.
Not that Derrick Lewis is a great fighter. There's a reason that this was his second heavyweight title fight, technically. So he's, even though all the talk has been about how the guy is basically just all power and no technique, whatever. We know that's kind of not as accurate as it's all relative to, I guess, the level of competition they're fighting. A lot less technical than, I guess, the other top heavyweights, but he's still more technical than me or you in terms of MMA. So I like that Ciryl Gane is getting – I felt like he did get some level of respect after this fight, that not only did he essentially shut out Derrick Lewis by all metrics, but he also just got that finish. And while you can maybe point to this fight and say, like, wasn't a very exciting fight, whatever, because that was my concern, was that Ciryl Gane was going to start being labeled as a boring fighter. I still saw some whispers, but it didn't grow as loud as I thought because he made a statement here.
Yes.
And Dominic, we know what's next, or what should be next, I should say. We have the title unification bout between Francis Ngannou and Ciryl Gane. What are your thoughts on Gane's performance here, and what do you think of that matchup with the champion, Francis Ngannou?
Yeah, his performance, literally, like you said, one of the best of the year we've seen. It was near flawless. I mean, the striking numbers, while are not officially confirmed, something upwards of like 120 to 15 or 16 in for Gane's favor, obviously. And he really just put on a clinic. And like you said, it was expected in terms of, okay, if Gane wins, this is how it's going to look. And I didn't think it was even going to be that one-sided, but man, he just looked incredible. Showed his ever-evolving game. I mean, this guy just fought a month ago. Gets put in here with the Black Beast, Derrick Lewis, one of the most dangerous fighters in UFC history. Made it look easy, barely got hit, chopped him down with some nasty, very, very hard leg kicks that hurt Lewis badly en route to the finish, ultimately in that round 3. Landed very flush, clean shots, was throwing together good combinations. He did everything and then some. And, I mean, him and Francis Ngannou, what a storyline there. Former teammates, both started. And, of course, Gane still in the Paris, France region, so a smaller circuit. Here they are now with Fernando Lopez, who took Francis to his heights and then now is bringing Ciryl Gane as Francis now trains in the States. And it's all there, right? An undefeated fighter that just finished Derrick Lewis, interim champion, against the most dangerous man maybe ever in the UFC history, and Francis Ngannou. It's going to be a collision course, and I can't wait to see it because really, you kind of have another Lewis versus Gane matchup, except Francis is more athletic than Derrick Lewis, more powerful than Derrick Lewis, more tools in the toolbox, so it does add that much more to this fight that's already super highly anticipated. I can't wait for it, man.
Derrick Lewis fans would look at that comment and say, well, technically Derrick Lewis beat Francis Ngannou.
This is true.
Even if it was the absolute worst fight of all time. I think what I foresee in this matchup when it happens, I think it's going to happen quicker than we're expecting, first off. Ngannou and his team were reportedly very committed to fighting in September. Obviously, that might not be when this fight happens now because literally Gane's fought 2 straight months.
Yeah.
However, I do think you do see this fight before 2022, which is very important in my opinion because we weren't big on the interim title being introduced here. However, it happened. The fight was a showcase for Gane. His stock has risen due to the fact that he had gold strapped around his waist, no matter what we think of it. But now he is the rightful next guy for Ngannou. And we saw in Ngannou's title win over Stipe the advancements he had made in his game. Not only was the power there, but he was kind of ragdolling Stipe in all facets. I mean, even in the grappling, he was winning.
Offensively and defensively.
That's terrifying because we knew that's where Stipe's clear route was in the first fight. We thought that would still maybe be there in the second one. He showed that's not the case. He is not the same guy. So once again, I'm going to introduce this theory of Ciryl Gane might have to be perfect for 25 minutes while Ngannou has to be perfect for simply one punch.
Yeah.
And he is just a more technical fighter at this point than a Derrick Lewis. He's faster, he's stronger, he's more powerful. So because of that, it does introduce an even greater challenge than what we thought we might have with Derrick Lewis. But the result could end up being the same because I really like Ciryl Gane as a potential next champion. And honestly, Dominic, I think there's a good chance this guy's not losing for a long time.
I don't know if there's a heavyweight, and this includes the champion, and this includes a man that's coming to heavyweight, John Jones.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone can beat Ciryl Gane right now because he's only going to keep getting better. And this is only 10 fights into his career, and he's holding an interim gold belt around his waist. going to fight for an undisputed title, hopefully by the end of the year. I personally think it's going to happen in December just because all the other cards are booked. But he took no damage. It's got to be the end of the year headliner. And, we could be on to something very, very special that we've never seen before in UFC heavyweight history.
And before we move on, I want to give at least a little bit of time directed to our loser of this bout, Derrick Lewis. Obviously, this is a gut punch, both literally and figuratively. This was in his hometown, home state.
Yeah.
Everybody was rooting for him here. And you said something interesting on Friday that I really didn't think about, and it was that it felt like a lot of the talk surrounding this fight, despite the fact that Lewis was the hometown favorite and whatnot, it felt like a lot of the talk was surrounding Ciryl Gane.
Yeah.
And while that's probably true, I did notice probably a greater increase in terms of casual viewership because of Derrick Lewis, because he's really done a good job of sort of getting his personality out there in these post-fight interviews and stuff, just saying the craziest shit. So I think you're right, though, in terms of like a hardcore fan base and a lot of the journalists around. I felt like a lot of the talk was surrounding Ciryl Gane. So Derrick Lewis kind of came in here as a big underdog and ultimately performed adequately, if not even more so than the odds had placed on him. Now, truthfully, despite how, when you look at the metrics, the stats, it looks like Derrick Lewis shouldn't even be in the same octagon as a guy like Ciryl Gane. However, in my opinion, this was kind of what I expected, which is so weird to say. So weird because, this was a shutout by any way you can measure it. It was a shutout. Literally even by the actual striking numbers, like you mentioned, it was like 115-16 or something.
Yeah.
That's crazy. However, for Lewis, we've always known him to be this guy that can make magic happen, even when his time seems so bleak.
Yeah,
Alexander Volkov fight. I will never forget seeing your face when we watched that, because you said those words. You're the reason Volkov lost. So if that 6'7" Russian decides that he wants to make someone pay, he's coming knocking on your door.
No,
I'm just kidding. But I remember we were watching it, and there was like 15 seconds left, and like Volkov had just basically did what Gane did, but maybe a little less. And you were like, "This fight's over." Like, I forget, it was like, "This fight's over. Like, move on, next one." We're drinking a little bit, so it's kind of like the anticipation for McGregor or for Tony and Anthony Pettis, and then McGregor Habib is kind of through the roof. And then out of nowhere in those last 10 seconds, Lewis lands that bomb, and then the follow-up shots on the ground to put away Volkov. And I wish I still had the video I took of your reaction when it happened. It was so funny.
Me too.
I know. But that's Derrick Lewis, though. And that's not just a one-time thing. The guy has constantly
come from behind.
He always comes from behind, because, again, it's that idea that he only has to be perfect for 1 second, which is, I think, kind of count. He's very good at timing his power shots. You look at the Curtis Blades knockout.
Yeah, beautiful.
That was perfect timing.
Yeah.
And he definitely baited Blades into that. Like, that's talent.
It was calculated.
Right there.
Yeah.
So, with all that being said, I'm kind of rambling here, but I want to give Lewis some respect. And I guess this is a guy that at this point has fought a lot of the top contenders of heavyweight, Dominic. But what matchup would interest you for Derrick Lewis? Even though this was a tough loss, you still think that the guy's got a decent name to him, and he's going to be fighting probably top 10 level guys, probably on the either fight night headliner or a co-main pay-per-view, or a feature bout, something like that. Yeah. So what name maybe sticks out to you right now for who's next for him?
Got to be Biggie Boy, right? Jairzinho Rozenstruik, I think, would be the way to go. He's coming off of that victory against Augusto Sakai after he lost to Ciryl Gane. So he's riding that one win there, and he looked really good in it. One of some of the best we've seen of Rosenstruik, and then he got to finish with like a second left in the fight, or in the round, in the first round. And obviously Lewis was on a 4-fight streak coming into this one, the latter 2 by KO before losing to Gane in the interim bout. This is a fresh matchup, 2 guys that haven't fought before, 2 heavy hitters. I think you could easily headline a fight night between the Black Beast and Biggie Boy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, both guys that have headlined multiple cards before. That matchup seems almost like tailor-made. Mm-hmm. Rosenstruik does have probably more technique than people would give him credit for in that matchup, because I think people look at those two as almost like they're the same fighter.
I feel like he's still a really underrated guy, really.
He really is. I mean, it all comes down to that. From what I've always seen and heard is that Rosenstruik and Lewis a lot of people like to put them as if they're the same fighter.
Yeah.
It's just not the case. Rosenstruik has power. You saw what he did to Overeem, where he kind of Hadoukened him into the cage, and which was nuts with like 2 seconds left. And
against Sakai, man, he put it all together.
That's true. But I think he has a more complete game.
Yeah.
I think his striking even is very good in that heavyweight division. But again, it's going to be the same kind of test for him against Derrick Lewis, because he has shown that he can get put out.
Yeah.
Obviously, Francis Ngannou in their fight with Rosenstruik, you look at it was amazing to watch it in real time, but then you go back and watch it and you're like, these strikes are so telegraphed, and just, I mean, sometimes you can't do anything about it. If you can't get out of the way, you're going to get touched with one of those, and it's just night-night. So that could be a similar battle he'll have to fight here with Lewis. But I do like that fight. I wish we would have saw Abdurakhimov and Dawkins.
Yeah.
Because I would say Dawkins if he had won that.
I think he has a high ceiling. Yeah.
And I think that would just be an interesting matchup, again, a fresh one. So, yeah, one of those two, if Dawkins, Abdurakhimov get rebooked, or I would even say Chris Dawkins now. He's number 10.
Yeah.
I know that's quite a steep step down, but I don't necessarily want to see him run it back with Volkov. I know he's
fought so many of them already. Yeah.
There's not a ton. I mean, he has a lot of options. It's just a matter of when he wants to get back in there.
And obviously, we're making it clear here, him and Stipe probably doesn't make sense, right? Because that is a matchup that's never happened, but just doesn't seem.
It's just not going to happen. I just don't see Stipe taking that fight.
Right. So you're only left with so many people.
Yeah. Let's move on to the co-main event.
I mean,
hey, look, with the co-main event, we didn't put this in our headliners for Friday, and Jose Aldo decided to go in there and put on a hell of a show, a hell of a performance, turning back the clock, as the headline states. This was his best performance as a bantamweight.
100%.
He looked very good against Marlon Vera, but this was a step up in competition, more in his actual range, I guess, rankings-wise.
Yeah.
Pedro Munhoz, a guy who's had some very big wins in the division, including over former champions like Cody Garbrandt. And Aldo, in my opinion, shut him out. I thought it was 3-0.
Yeah.
It was a great fight. Munhoz was never out of the fight, but Aldo, when it came to the leg kicks, the jab, his movement, his head movement, I should say, it was all 10 out of 10. I mean, this was
his body work, man.
Yeah, it was an amazing performance. And with that, I don't necessarily think that like a win like this, as good as he looked, I don't think we're necessarily going to start talking about him getting another title shot anytime soon. But I do believe that this was a win he needed, and in the fashion that he probably needed, to keep his name relevant, keep his head above water in this very talented bantamweight division that he is so highly ranked in.
Yeah.
And like I even said Friday, if he lost this, I mean, 1-3 in the division, how do you – sure, he would still be probably top 6, top 7, but, I mean, at some point, where do those matchups dry up, and the UFC is just like, this guy ain't really cutting it in this division. But a win there, and now he's clearly top 5 still, and likely going to be due for another big fight. So, Dominic, I'll give you a chance to talk about what you thought of his performance here. I'm sure you're going to feel very similar to what I just said, but then going to be similar to, I guess, the last question here. Where does Jose Aldo sort of fit in for the I guess, immediate future because we have so many moving parts at the top. We've had a lot of movement with this bantamweight division. We're still waiting to get that clarity from the Sterling Yan matchup. So where does Aldo fit in with the top of the heap?
I'm glad you asked that question. The fight itself, he looked incredible. It was definitely, like you said, his best performance at 135 pounds. Crazy, the guy makes the weight. Still looks so good doing it. Really,
he made featherweight look difficult at one point in his career.
Yeah.
Like his fight with Mark Hominick, he really struggled to make it. So nobody thought this was going to go well, and look what's happened.
Yeah, I think it's like a clear lifestyle change where he walks around lighter, therefore the weight cut's not as bad, and he's just as good as they come. I mean, we're talking about one of the greatest to ever do it. The long reigning featherweight champion, undefeated for 10 years, moves down a weight class, 2-2 in the arguably most stacked, if not the second most stacked division in the UFC. And he looked amazing. He pieced up Munhoz, picked him apart, picked his shots. The body work, as I previously mentioned, incredible. His leg kicks were there. His head strikes, his distance, everything he managed was so perfect. And to do it against a guy that's as dangerous as Munhoz was very impressive because he never really got into trouble all that much. And Munhoz is a very heavy hitter. What comes next, Noah? I've been calling for this for a very long time.
It's going to be the same fight I have, I'm pretty sure.
And I'm not going to hear anything else about it. There's no other option because it's something that we've never gotten. And I know it's not what it could have been at one point in time, but damn it. The legacy fight between two GOATs in their own right in their divisions, Jose Aldo, Dominic Cruz, is the fight to make, and I will stand and fight on this hill.
No, I agree. That is what's next, especially if Aldo wants to continue as a bantamweight. I will raise an interesting point. I watched Luke Thomas's video where he was giving his thoughts on the night of fights. He does that kind of directly after these pay-per-view cards. He'll record himself just for like an hour and a half going over just kind of what he thought. And I saw him raise an interesting point. He was comparing Aldo's place at this point, at bantamweight, but mostly in his career, to that of Rich Franklin when he had been unseated as the middleweight champion from Anderson Silva and then had lost the rematch, where it was like, okay, for Rich Franklin, a guy at that point who could have just been like, I guess there's nothing really left for me to do. I've been champion. Doesn't look like I'll be champion again. But he didn't do that. He kept wanting to challenge himself. He stayed motivated and took a lot of high-profile fights. He lost some. He won some. But whether it was at middleweight, whether it was at light heavyweight, whether it was at 195 pounds, I believe he even had some catchweight bouts. He just was very much the prize fighter. And I'm taking a lot of this from Luke. So get people listening, watching, go watch Luke Thomas's video if you want to hear all those thoughts and even more. But I kind of agree with that sentiment, and that's why, like, who's to say that Aldo doesn't go back up to featherweight for another high-profile fight? I like the Cruz one. I want to see that legacy fight, a big fight like we're talking about here. But this one is going to sound very outlandish, and you probably have already heard this one thrown around a little bit. But who's to say Conor McGregor's return fight, this guy doesn't go back down to featherweight and fight Jose Aldo a second time? Yeah. Now, I know right now that sounds crazy because we're sitting there. First off, McGregor was killing himself to cut to featherweight. However, it's clear to me that despite what we thought, McGregor's run at lightweight would be maybe his best division. It's not. Featherweight's his best division. So because of that, if he comes back, I mean, if he can, and this is a big if, like if he can get back down to that weight. But again, we're just talking about a guy in Jose Aldo who we never would have thought could make bantamweight.
Yeah, he's done it 4 times.
And he's done it and made it look somewhat, I don't know if easy is the right word, but he's done it pretty clean.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, don't be surprised if when we get closer to McGregor's return bout, if that's not a fight that starts poking its head out. Because if I'm being honest, that would be a pretty fun fight to watch. I mean, honestly, if you look at their 2 careers since they fought, who would have thought coming off that 13-second knockout by McGregor that Aldo would be 5-5 since that fight, while I believe Conor is 2-3.
Something like that. Yeah.
Or three, no, he's 3-4.
3-4. Mm-hmm.
He beat Nate Diaz the second time, Eddie Alvarez, and Cowboy Cerrone, but he's lost to Nate Diaz. He lost to
Habib and Dustin twice.
Yep. So he's 3-4 since what was debatably the biggest moment of his career.
Think about
So who would have thought coming off of that Aldo would really remain the more relevant fighter in some ways?
Yeah.
Relevant more in terms
of activity
and competition, not obviously name value.
Right.
So completely agree though. First and foremost, Aldo Cruz, that fight makes a lot of sense. And Cruz should want that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Let's get into the featured bout, which was one of our headliners. And honestly, they're big takeaways as we thought there might be. He does it again, man. Vicente Luque, and just even his last two fights. Don't get me wrong, the guy has impressed me his whole career. There was a time where I looked at him as being like one of my guys. When I say that, like, remember on one of our previous Reddit roundtables, Dom, when the question was involving like that WWE podcast where they do like my boys, guys that have never held titles, may never hold titles, but they're just like your boys, you know.
Yeah.
And Vicente Luque would fall into that group at one point for me. A guy that I'm like, he's never going to win for a title. You know, I'm like, he's in all of these wars. He's winning a lot of them, but then he'll lose a couple, you know. Never going to really be a guy fighting for a belt, but he'll be competitive enough to hang with a lot of good fighters. Apparently, I underestimate him because he has just improved so much. And in his last two fights, getting 2 straight submission wins.
Both via Darce.
I don't care what people say about the Tyron Woodley that he defeated, but that was a better Tyron Woodley than had lost to Gilbert Burns and Colby Covington.
And he had never been submitted before, ever.
Yeah, but I mean, do you disagree that even though that was the 4th straight loss for Woodley, I think the Woodley that fought Luque
was the best version.
Was a better version than what Colby and Gilbert had beat.
I agree.
So Luque, while having to kind of weather a storm, relatively did it in very quick fashion, first round. While here, similar story. Michael Chiesa looked humongous, by the way. The guy obviously at one time fought at lightweight. Doesn't make any sense. He looks huge here at welterweight. The guy's literally looking like a middleweight.
They say he walks around over 200 pounds.
Yeah, that's absurd. So, surprisingly, Chiesa actually, I think, stunned Luque early on the feet, which was not exactly something to be expected. But then he got a really good takedown, really powerful takedown. And, you know, I think where he went wrong here was he kind of went more for the submissions rather than using his wrestling.
Yeah.
Because once this turned into a battle of jiu-jitsu, essentially, I think Luque just showed how not that I would say his jiu-jitsu is better than Chiesa, but how underrated it might have been by Chiesa coming in here. Chiesa didn't quite have those submissions locked up the way you would want, so he gave Luque an opportunity to slide out. And then Luque, that Darce choke is his bread and butter. Is his bread and butter. I mean, did you see how quickly he put that thing on? An amazing performance. And, you know, Dominic, we talked a lot about this in our group chat with our friends. So, but I got to get this conversation out here because I'm so intrigued now. Give your thoughts on both guys in this fight, but also, where does this put Vicente Luque in the lineup of welterweight contenders who are looking to cash in to be the next challenger for Kamaru Usman?
Well, the fight was awesome for as long as it lasted. What was it, 325? Yeah. And like you said, Chiesa got an early stun, which was unexpected, able to land the great takedowns as always. But like you said, he kind of messed up when he started to go for the rear naked. Not that it's a bad idea to go for a submission, but it was never really tight to begin with, and there was always wiggle room, and that's all Luque needs. He's very slick on the ground. Yes, he goes out there and stands and bangs with people. This guy now has 11 knockouts and 8 submissions. He does everything. He is a Swiss Army knife in the welterweight division. And then when he locked up that Darce out of seemingly nowhere, the way he transitioned and moved around on the mat so quickly was something to behold. He looked incredible, got the tap, gets the biggest win of his career. That's 4 in a row now. I'm pretty sure they're all via finish. If not, sue me. I'm pretty close to being all via finish. And now he's going to flip-flop, more than likely, be number 5. And he officially enters title contention. Does he get it in his next fight, though? This is where the group chat really took off last night. I was a bit reserved in it, but one of the gentlemen in our group chat was with me, and he was responding with you. Shout out to our friend Jordan. And so he was kind of giving me his thoughts, and I'm reading your messages, and I see both sides of the fence. And I don't want to take the words out of your mouth, so I'll let you explain your side. But you're more on, okay, I think Luque could go for a title. Whereas our friend is like, well, I see the argument, but probably not yet. Give him one more. And I'm like smack dab in the middle because, as the headline says, a fresh matchup. That's the biggest thing with champion Kamaru Usman right now because everyone he's fighting is a rematch. He just rematched with Masvidal. He's about to rematch with Colby. If he fights Leon after Colby, should he beat Colby, that is technically still a rematch, people. I know it's been like 5 or 6 years ago, but still a rematch. Enter Vicente Luque, a fresh matchup. Like I said, a Swiss Army knife that can present problems for Kamaru on the feet and on the ground. And you've got yourself an interesting stylistic clash where all of a sudden, hey, you might be fighting for a belt. However, there is the guy, Leon Edwards, sitting in that spot. And I just feel so bad for the guy because he's on a 10-fight unbeaten streak. He beats Nate Diaz up for 24 straight minutes and then gets rocked in the final minute. And it's essentially looked at as a loss for the poor guy. I mean, it's just awful. And so part of me's like, it's clear Luque Edwards do that fight, number 1 contender fight, because Luque won't fight Burns because they're best friends, training partners, all that fun stuff. Then part of me's like, you know what, man? Leon's done enough, the poor guy. Let him wait. Get the winner of Usman Colby. Then you get another wrench thrown because if Colby wins, they're going to run the trilogy. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. I'm smack dab in the middle of this now, and I really teeter-totter both ways. You may persuade me today. Jordan may persuade me tomorrow. But as of now, I'm in the middle. Go ahead and go because I know you want to really tackle this.
Well, just to be clear, it was a very respectful debate.
Yes.
Because I definitely see the point of view of what essentially Jordan's point of view is the point of view that probably more fans are going to share, which is that Leon Edwards should be next after Colby Covington and that he has earned it without having to take another fight. Maybe some people would say, well, no, I think he probably should take one more, but I still think right now he would be next after Colby. And then there are a lot of people that think he should have gotten it over Colby. Mm-hmm. And I definitely see a lot of that. We've talked about this a few times on this podcast. So I'll try not to, run through a lot of the same points. But based on what I've seen from Luque in his last 2 performances against very good competition, again, the best Tyron Woodley we had seen since he had held the belt, basically. Yeah. And then Michael Chiesa, who looked so big and strong here, and we know how good he can be, and he submitted him. And Michael Chiesa being submitted, what? Yeah. Against a guy who's known more as a striker, even though we've kind of shown and with the stats and ultimately in the results here that Luque is more than just a striker, but I think sometimes he falls into that 5-round wars or whatever, you know. So my point of view was that I think Luque could very well be the next guy, and I think I don't want to like switch up how I worded it there. I'm pretty sure I said would be deserving of the next title shot over Leon Edwards. Now, a big argument against this point is that Leon Edwards has a win over Vicente Luque.
Yeah.
And it happened more recent than Leon Edwards' last loss to Kamaru Usman. So, understandable there. I think when Leon Edwards fans talk about, and I'm not saying I'm not a Leon Edwards fan, but I guess when people who believe Leon Edwards should be next are giving their reasons, I always think the unbeaten streak shouldn't necessarily be the thing they cling to, because yes, 10-fight unbeaten streak, which I hate even It's so annoying to say that because
of
you
the
have
no
that.
contest.
Yeah, like that's not a win. Like I don't.
Yeah.
Whatever. But okay, 10-fight unbeaten streak, but 9-fight win streak. I'm just gonna word it like that. To me, you have to dig into that win streak and look at the level of competition. While when Edwards beat Luque at the time he beat him, that for sure put him in front of Luque at that time and should have opened the door to more promising, I guess, challenges to get him farther quicker. But if you compare their resumes since that fight, Luque has the better wins, in my opinion.
More active.
Because the top 2 wins for each guy in their careers is going to be for Edwards, Rafael dos Anjos, who is not a welterweight, and then Nate Diaz, who, I mean, Nate Diaz is great and all, but not necessarily, I guess,
like a top 5 contender.
Yeah. Maybe he is, but like a big name, but not really. I wouldn't put him over either of Luque's biggest wins, being Tyron Woodley and now Michael Chiesa. So that's to me where my argument came in. That like I think Luque and the way he's winning these fights.
Yeah.
Just how impressive he's looking. He's hurting
statements.
guys on the feet, but then he's submitting them, choking them out, which is supposed to be not his strongest skill.
Yeah.
And for Usman, again, the fresh matchup, and that's where you were falling in there. I think the fresh matchup matters so much. Sure, should Edwards, for most people, a 9-fight since the last loss being against the champion, who at those time they were both prospects.
Yeah.
That's definitely enough time to say, like, there's unanswered questions in a rematch. Like, it really wouldn't even be like a rematch, in my opinion. Like, it is, but it's kind of like the Poirier-McGregor.
Yeah, where they're so far removed.
Yeah, it's not – to me, it's like just a new fight, really. Yeah. But to me, again, Edwards just – and some of this isn't really his fault, but it's just not been the strongest competition. I mean, the win over Cowboy Cerrone was good, but, I mean, that Cowboy Cerrone was already kind of on a – I mean, yes, he kind of bounced back after, but at the time that was just not the best Cowboy Cerrone we've seen. I just, I'm not opposed to Leon Edwards getting the title shot, and I see the arguments. The win over Luque is going to be the biggest one. I mean, he beat the guy. But in my opinion, dudes, does anybody out there think Wonder Boy is more deserving of a title shot right now than Luque? If you say no, then that's good because I agree, but also Wonder Boy pieced up Luque like 2 years ago. To me, it's just it matters at the time, but then it's all about where you go from there. And timing is everything in this sport.
Yeah.
So Luque is stringing together a great last 3 wins. I think he's on a 3-5 winning streak. These last 2 have been very good statement performances. I think the timing is in his favor. While for a guy like Leon, who is just so been, unfortunately, some of it his fault, some of it not, but so inactive.
Yeah.
I just don't see where I don't see him getting the shot over Luque. I really don't. And you could say that shouldn't be the case or whatnot. In my eyes, right there, where I just predict that's more off of what I think the company will do. I think Usman likes the matchup.
He tweeted about it.
I think he likes the idea of fighting Luque more than Edwards. I think he might even probably give Luque's name a little more value than Edwards at this point, which – to me, that's like splitting hairs. Neither guy's necessarily breaking down the box office, but that doesn't really matter. The fresh matchup is going to be the key here. And it's just hard when a guy is putting on statement after statement win. And for Edwards, I think he does. I would like to see Edwards, Luque fight in the meantime.
Because that rematch is pretty long removed, right? It's been a few years.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember. I think it was 2018, maybe.
Yeah, you look at what each have done since. I mean,
yeah, I mean, you just seen a lot of improvements since then for both guys.
Yeah.
So I think there's room to run that fight back. And considering that those are the 2 guys after Colby right now in my eyes.
Yeah.
Gilbert's in there, but
still needs at least 1.
Yeah, and then you still got Chiesa and Wonder Boy in there, but they're like further out. Masvidal further out.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people were talking about Luque and Masvidal, which might be a better fight, but personally, I just think Luque Edwards would be the fight to do.
Then do Burns Masvidal.
Sure. I mean, I don't know. I'm not even thinking about.
I'm getting a little.
Yeah, maybe Burns Chiesa. I don't know. There's some interesting matchups, but I would like to see those two determine who's the number one contender after. I just think Usman might be like, no, I want Luque because it's a fresh matchup, and
that could very well
that's
just
fair.
be like, all right, let's do it.
That's fair in my opinion. So let's get into the rest, Dominic, because I just went on a big long tangent right there. So we got a few more fights to talk about. Again, on the main card, Tecia Torres now 2-0 over Angela Hill with another unanimous decision win on Saturday. I didn't have a lot going into this fight that I really felt was relevant to talk about, I guess. It was more like I feel like the aftermath might have more to talk about. And really my question here for you, Dom, shout out Tecia Torres. That's 4 fights in a row after she had a tough losing streak at one point in her career.
A bit of a resurgence.
Yeah, a bit of a resurgence. So respect to her for that. But I think the bigger talking point here is for the loser, Angela Hill. And I haven't seen a lot of this chatter online. But is it time that we might need to evaluate like Angela Hill's future?
What's next? Yeah.
Yeah, because her record's not great in the UFC, and we recognize that she is a relevant strawweight fighter.
Yes.
She is a good strawweight fighter. She could just as easily be 500 in her record as she could be what she is, which is I think like 8-12 or 9-12 or something like that. She could be 10-10 if a couple decisions went her way that probably should have. However, they haven't went her way, and this record's not good. And this was a disappointing performance in my eyes for her. She did what she does, and she didn't look bad. I just thought I needed to see more aggression out of her, more of a I think she just needs to be more willing to engage, maybe. Make it dirty, man. Get in there and make it a dog fight.
Especially against someone like Tecia, who is going to bring it to you.
Yeah,
you have to be aggressive.
For someone who has been on the bad end of a couple decisions, like get pissed off and be like, no, you will not screw me over this time. And I just didn't see that urgency out of her. But what I'm getting at here, Dominic, is I want to get your thoughts on where do you think Angela Hill goes from here? Is there really anything left for her to do at this point? We know the UFC likes her. They've had her in some commentary roles, so she has become a part of that family of fighters turned commentators. Now, but is there anything left for her in terms of fighting? Should there be anything left? Should she really keep going? Should the UFC really keep putting her in these kind of matchups? Because at this point, in a lot of ways for me, it's looking like she might lose to the people you want her to beat, but beat the people you want her to lose to.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at her now, and I say this lightly and not in like a negative term because the word gatekeeper gets thrown around and gets like a negative sentiment, but I don't think it always has to necessarily be looked at that way. And I look at Angela Hill as essentially like a top 15 welcoming to the, the up-and-comers or the people that have been on skids and are then fighting their way back, kind of like Tecia, where okay, Angela, if you beat her, a very tough test, someone who's been in there with the best in this division, if you beat her, you have earned a spot in the rankings pool to ascend closer to the top 10, so on and so forth. And I just feel like that's what she's going to kind of keep doing. She's the most active female fighter on the roster, regardless of weight class. She's not afraid to accept fights on short notice. She'll go in there against someone making their UFC debut or someone like Tecia Torres, who's been in there, 10, 12 times. So I don't think it's anything where she's going to be released or cut. I do think she's going to continue fighting. She is a little bit older in terms of the weight class. I think she's 36 or 37. But, man, she's always in fun fights regardless. This one was fun as well. More one-sided for Tecia, but still fun. And I think it's just more the same going forward. Maybe not another ranked fighter next because it is a few in a row now against ranked people. But, yeah, man, welcoming people into that top 15 is kind of where I see her wheelhouse in this kind of latter tier of her career. I do just want to give a shout out to Tecia as well because I know you want to talk about Angela, but I'll good on her again. The three or four fight win streak she's on, the career resurgence. She looked very good, very aggressive, clean, grappling, striking. So she's going to launch herself back into the top 10 where she hasn't been in quite some time. Very excited to see what will come next for her as well.
Yeah, truthfully, sure the fight was fine on Saturday. Like, yes, I guess you could call it fun, but to me, it's like I just don't care. Like for Torres, I hate to be that way because Torres put on a good performance and she is on a bit of a resurgence. But this is where my problem comes for Angela Hill moving forward. I'm seeing the same type of performances out of her, and they're not getting the job done. So I'm not seeing anything. Again, the lack of urgency is just bothering me a little bit. Where, she seems so pissed off after being on the wrong end of these decisions, and this one was obviously more in Torres's favor, not really a decision that was hard to make. But because of that, I don't know if I necessarily – do I need to see Angela Hill in a high-profile fight anymore? Like, what's it really do? She's under 500. Like, to me, you would – let's say that she went on a 4-fight or 5-fight winning streak after this. That would put her at what, like 12-12 or 13-12 or 14-12, whatever. Sure, that might 5 fights in a row. Maybe she would be knocking on the door for a title shot in terms of rankings. But are you really going to give someone who's like a 500 fighter in your promotion a title shot? Maybe, but it's like I don't know. I don't really see, I guess, the interest to I like her. I like her personality and that she is in fun fights a lot of times, but I'm just starting to not care about her fights as much. Like, again, coming into this one was very close to not really even we didn't really even say much about it Friday. There just wasn't much to talk about.
Yeah.
So next time she fights, she may not even make it. Like, she may not even be on the rest. It's just how it's kind of turned for her at this point. Some of that her fault, some of it not. Just I don't know. I'm just it's just annoying or upsetting, I guess. And I don't know. Neither of those words are accurate. Those are a bit too strong. I guess it's just it's a little disappointing that I thought we were going to see something a lot more out of her here than what we got.
Fair enough.
Opening up our main card was a couple prospects who did put on a very good show. Song Yudong does get the split decision nod over Casey Kenny. Truthfully, Dominic, I admitted I was watching a lot of these fights on my phone while hanging out with a lot of my friends up until the Torres Hill fight. From then on, was watching on TV with commentary, got the crowd and all that. So because of that, I didn't really score this fight live. I mean, I paid attention, but didn't really have it. In my head, I was like, I looked close, and obviously the scorecards tell me it went pretty close. But I'm going to let you give your thoughts here first, since I think you probably have a more clear grasp on what you saw.
Yeah, I mean, the fight went probably how most of the community expected it to be. Two young guns that were going to come out and give it all they had, because that's what they do. And Song Yudong's still only 23 years old, by the way. I'm so impressed with this guy and kind of the names he's already racked up, and even in losses as well, to be that young. I think he has a super high ceiling. And for Casey Kenny, a guy that was a former 2-division champion in LFA, still a high ceiling for him. I know it's a 2-fight skid, but it was against Dominic Cruz via split decision and against Song Yudong via split decision. So he's in close fights, dog fights, if that. He was very disappointed the judges didn't see it his way. I know you didn't score it live. I personally had it for Song Yudong 2-1, but it was a very fun fight. And I think, like, if you're Casey Kenny and it is your second loss in a row, there's nothing to hang your hat on here. Again, look at the guys that it's been against. He still has a pretty solid record in the UFC, even though he's still early on in his career. So I think he can easily bounce back against another kind of a prospect name in this division. And it's one of the hardest divisions in the UFC. So just wait and see. If you stack together a few, you're all of a sudden in top 10 territory and making a name for yourself. But Song Yudong, ever impressive as always. Again, 23 years old. The Asian market behind him as well. We know how big that is for the UFC right now. So, a future prospect, or he's already a prospect, but a guy that can crack into the top 15, maybe with 1 or 2 more big wins on his resume. Very fun fight, 2 electric fighters, and they're going to keep performing the same way moving forward.
Is Song Yudong not ranked right now?
No.
Oh, he was. I don't know. He must have fallen out. Yeah, I like those thoughts. Song Yudong, good win for you here. However, what I this might be a hot take. You can give me your gut reaction to this.
Okay.
I almost walk away from this thinking Casey Kenny might have the more complete game because he is known as a bit more of a grappler.
Yeah.
But I guess, and maybe this is I'll just explain and then you can tell me.
Okay.
Maybe we'll talk through this together. Casey Kenny more of a grappler and had a hard time. Song Yadong showed some really good takedown defense.
Mm-hmm.
So there wasn't a lot of opportunities to get this fight to the ground. So because of that, Kenny, who is not necessarily known as a striker, held his own on the feet with the more powerful, probably more diverse skill set of Yadong. So I guess in my mind, I was like, well, maybe Casey Kenny does have maybe the more complete skill set. But again, if you can't get the fight to your wheelhouse, that's something you're just going to have to work on. But I think that might be less of a learning curve for him than for a lot of people who show glaring weaknesses in their game.
Yeah.
I think Kenny could bounce back from this in a big way. For Yadong, he's 23 years old. I mean, the guy's phenomenal at this point in his career. The
Very
fact that
active.
he's still, taking and beating a lot of guys that are much older than him, and he's just doing it relatively. I mean, this wasn't an easy fight, but it's not a fight he took a lot of damage in. That's a big thing because you compare him, look at a guy like Max Holloway, who has taken so much damage in his career, but we all love him. We all think he's amazing. He's put on amazing fights, amazing performances, but he's taken a lot of damage. Yadong doesn't quite have that as another guy that started in the UFC at a young age.
Mm-hmm.
So that's good for him. I do like his style of fighting. I think I like it in terms of how far it can take him. He's kind of good everywhere. I think he's still developing where his strengths really are. Like, what is really Song Yadong? Like, when you think of him, what is his number one thing?
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's still finding that out, which is kind of impressive considering he was at one point a top 15 bantamweight and probably still is in some ways. And, good win, I thought.
Yeah.
The headliner, the prelims. This was the fight of the night overall, people. This fight was fan-freaking-tastic as Rafael Fiziev gets the nod over Bobby Green via unanimous decision. But y'all got to stop sleeping on Bobby, including me, and probably Dominic a little bit too. I think I don't want to talk for you. Just in terms of me and you, we like Bobby Green.
Oh, yeah.
We like the run he's been on as of late, and we recognize that his talent is on the feet. He's a good boxer, but a guy who in his losses hasn't really changed. He hasn't – I don't want to say he hasn't improved. He has. But some of his weaknesses I don't think he has improved on. He's sort of just retooled and strengthened his already strengths.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of the reasons when he's lost certain fights, he hasn't necessarily worked to improve those. Yeah. So because of that, good boxer, but I thought Fiziev might be in for a bit of a showcase here as probably the much better striker in terms of well-roundedness. He implements a lot more kicks and probably just has a more diverse skill set in general. However, these guys went back and forth, and this really turned into a cardio battle in some ways, which ultimately Bobby Green kind of won that battle. Round 3 was a very clear Bobby Green round, but the right guy got the nod here on Fiziev. He definitely won 2-1, clear as day. But these guys were throwing bombs at each other for all 3 rounds. Fiziev, again, mixing in the kicks, mixing in some body work, throwing a lot of good headshots. Bobby Green doing a lot of good work on his own, laying some really good shots to the head. However, he was really trying to lure Fiziev into some traps, maybe getting a little cocky, putting his hands down, shaking his head after Fiziev would throw some strikes. So doing a little bit of mind games in there. I'm not sure how much that really worked, but still something worth noting. And this fight was just a lot of fun. I mean, the crowd went crazy for it from what I heard. Again, I watched it on my phone. Didn't have the crowd noise, but that's what you love to see. And both guys should be elevated from this because I already value and look at Fiziev as, yes, he's still, at this point, maybe he's not a top 5 lightweight, but I think he's right. He's on his way to becoming a top 5 lightweight. And for Bobby Green to hang in there and be so close with him.
With the young gun, yeah.
Kind of think that he's not too far off from that as well. And maybe I undervalued even how good I thought Bobby Green was. And he is a bit on the older side at this point. So the clock is ticking, I guess, for him to make those improvements to move forward. But if he gets the right matchups, man, he could be top 10 before you know it.
Yeah, and a very exciting fighter, like you mentioned, for Fiziev. You know, he's arguably the biggest prospect at 155 right now. Obviously, we know how stacked this division is.
Mm-hmm.
And for now, what is he, 3-0, 4-0 in the UFC now?
I think he has one loss.
One loss?
It was like his debut or something.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, he's putting these wins together now against very prominent names. And you look at, Bobby Green, what he's done and had that kind of resurgence last year in the Apex, then goes on to fight Moises, really put together a good fight there, lost to close. I think that was a split decision, then fights Fiziev and loses a unanimous. So he's welcoming, these new faces, the fresh blood, but still it kind of speaks to what a win over a guy like Bobby Green can do for your career. And so if you're Rafael Fiziev here, I truthfully see him potentially fighting a top 15 guy next. Honestly, I think him and Thiago Moises is the fight to make. I think it's a jiu-jitsu test for Fiziev, and we know it's a striker-grappler matchup essentially. And I got to say, his shout-out or his call-out at the end of the fight for Hasbulla was quite funny as well. Bringing in kind of the MMA Twitter into the UFC octagon for the first time was fun. So, man, he wears the headgear, and you know what we say, if they wear the headgear, you're probably in some trouble.
You better run. You better run.
Yes.
What's funny is I actually had a more clear matchup for our loser here in Bobby Green. Fiziev, I think, top 15 for sure.
Yeah.
I think you could give him anyone 10 through 15, and I'd be okay with that.
Yeah.
However, for Bobby Green, I'm thinking a fight with Drew Dober, and the winner of that fight, personally, in my opinion, would be in line to get a top 15 next.
That's a perfect fight.
Two guys that have really, they're not have been on the cleanest of runs. Bobby Green, I think they're both on 2-fight losing streaks right now.
Yeah, now they are.
However, they've kind of crossed that line from really to where it almost doesn't matter as much because they're just always in these really good, fun fights. And there are guys that will step up and take short notice fights, will take fights against tough matchups. Mm-hmm. And the UFC likes those kind of guys. So I think they're sort of crossing that line to where, yes, wins and losses do matter, and you don't want to stack up a big losing streak, but maybe a little less so for these two, along with the likes of guys like Cowboy Cerrone, Nico Price,
right.
Some of those guys, Michelle Pereira, guys where they just are always really fun, and you just kind of match them up against each other at some point.
Exactly.
And the last one here, this was the headliner of the early prelims. We didn't talk about it on Friday, but I figured we would have something to talk about here. Didn't go the way. In some ways, I'm happy with what occurred, but then there's a blemish here too, because at flyweight, we had Manel Kape, the former Ryzen flyweight champion, who we were very excited about as he came into the UFC. Back-to-back fights he has dropped in his debut with Pantoja, very tough fight. Lost that one pretty clearly, then lost a very close fight in the follow-up. I forget who he lost to. The name's a bit hard to.
Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head.
But it was a very good fight and a fight that very close. So then he's 0-2, and you're kind of like, if he loses a third straight, this division's
the experiment's over.
This division's not deep, And he was getting a matchup with Ode Osborne, who is still really trying to find his place in the promotion, but a guy who's fought at bantamweight a few times, fought Brian Kelleher on the UFC 246 card. That was McGregor, Cerrone. I believe they were on the main card, actually. And a lot of people like Ode Osborne, so, not an easy fight by any means. But then Manel Kape misses weight by 4 pounds, which was nearly the nail on the coffin for this guy's UFC career. However, fight takes place, and Manel Kape does gets the knockout via flying knee and some follow-up shots. Round 1, 4 minutes, 44 seconds. A great performance out of Manel Kape here. pretty much back and forth for the first round. Bit of a feeling out round up until the actual knockout itself. And when knockout is loose term here because the referee did jump in pretty quick. I think Osborne kind of got flash KO'd. He got knocked out, came back too, but the referee had already committed to stopping the fight by then.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't necessarily – I don't think it's a bad call by the ref. I think it's just unfortunate maybe. Timing just rough for the guy. But, I mean, if you get flash KO'd, I mean, you probably should be done.
Yeah,
honestly.
true.
So, big win for Cape, and he does it in a highlight reel fashion. But, Dominic,
there's a great cloud.
You do have the miss weight here. So, what does this mean for Manel Cape standing in the UFC? Because even with this win, there's some baggage here. You know, he's underperforming, and then you have the missed weight. Some people were even online saying that they felt like this was deliberate, like a way for him to just try to get some sort of advantage because he knew he needed a win here. I know we ain't going to accuse him of that, but still the fact that people are calling him out for that says that maybe he's souring himself with the fans at this point. Where does Cape go from here?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we'll start with the positive, and it's like, okay, the first two fights he didn't let the hands go, and the rare moments when he did, he looked very good. So in this one, after another feeling out type fight, he finally let it go, and he ends up getting a great finish. But he misses weight. And, you know, maybe it's a thing where, is this guy maybe wanting to do 135? Is the weight cut getting to him as he continues to get older? Can he compete with the guys at 135? Was it just a bad camp? What went wrong here? Because it's great, because we've been wanting to see this from Manel Cape, and he gets the win finally that he needed in the UFC. But with the weight miss, it does hinder it quite a bit. He had to, forego his purse. Obviously, that makes him ineligible to get a bonus after a really good KO. So what's next for the guy? I mean, I don't think he's going to be gotten rid of just because he did win inevitably. But what could have been a very great win that could catapult him right back into that, because, again, it's not the deepest weight class, so 1 or 2 wins and you're really right there in, like, top 10 area. Now, all of a sudden, it's still – he doesn't really move much at all. So really a similar matchup could come next for him here. And if he goes out there and wins again, but this time does it cleanly, no weight misses, then we could finally maybe see some of this potential we've been anxiously awaiting. But as of right now, there's not a lot of takeaways you can have just because there was a bright spot, but it's more so shadowed by the weight miss.
His second loss was to Matheus Nicolau. I looked that up. That was a good guy, good opponent. Good guy, like I know him. Good opponent, a good flyweight on his way up right now. However, I definitely agree with that sentiment. It's very unclear, I think. Less clear than it would have been if he had just made the weight and had the highlight reel knockout. I don't think it's so bad that, like, again, highlight reel finish, flying knee type deal. And then I think that's going to make up for this a little bit.
Yeah.
Because just getting the win probably would have been enough to keep his head above water. But in the fashion he did it will probably help. I just don't know. It's hard for me to get a read here because after the fight, basically you see – his coach gives him his black belt, which, is always a big moment.
Mm-hmm.
But he gets his black belt after basically doing no jiu-jitsu. And also he missed weight, which is, like, kind of weird. I'm like, oh, that's strange. And then he was celebrating a lot after this fight, which makes me think that he knew that this was a bit of do or die for him here. So I'll be curious to see what kind of, as I mentioned earlier with Angela Hill, what level of urgency will Manel Cape show in maybe even his next fight. He bought himself one more, but I don't think he necessarily bought himself a 3-fight deal here. I think this next fight is still kind of a bit of, you gotta do or die a little bit too. I think he's going to be on that until he can have a clean win with no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I think you're going to have to take it fight by fight with him for now. Sorry, go ahead. I want to hear your question.
Do you think maybe, and whatever comes next for him, do we see maybe a future for Manel Cape at 135 potentially?
He's probably big enough for the division, but
I don't want to just throw out accusations because it's one weight miss, but it just
I don't know. There's just so many questions here regarding him as there would be for another guy.
I would say for him, stay at flyweight for now, but if he wants to go to bantamweight, sure. I just think, considering he is on a bit of a fight-by-fight basis in my head right now, you might want to stick with the division you know best, the division that you're going to be bigger in. Yes, if the weight cut's really that bad, then sure, but he's not really had a history of this. So that's why I'm less, I guess, I'm less likely to say, all right, he needs to go up. Hopefully it was just one bad miss and we'll bounce back from here. I'll be interested to see who he gets matched up with next. Will he get a top 15? Because, again, not the deepest division. Or will he still be kind of hovering in that? I don't even know how many contracted flyweights there are. I think there's less than 30.
20-something, yeah.
So will he still be kind of fighting an unranked guy next? I mean, either one would make sense. It's just I'm curious to see how the UFC value him at this point.
Yeah.
And, but good win. Just need to get it done clean next time.
Right.
That's going to wrap it up here. As you can see, it's getting very dark in my room, so
it is
staying up. But that's going to wrap it up for the MMA Weekend Recap. Next time you see us will be on Friday with another MMA Weekend preview.
Yeah, Bellator and PFL.
Exactly. But until then, Dominic, tell the good people where they can find you on social media.
Find me on Twitter, on Instagram at dslee14. More importantly, go follow, engage, give us a shout out for 1 year. The Below Average Joe's MMA podcast. You can find it on social media at BAJ_MMA podcast. I just want to say, because Noah did off the top, thank you everyone for 1 year, full support, and many, many more years and episodes and just knocking barriers down to go. Okay, go ahead, Noah. It's dark in there.
Yeah, before I get scared, I got to...
You look like you're in a scary movie. Like the Blair Witch when she's on. Go ahead.
Twitter, Instagram at @NTBaker_. There's a link in my bio on both of those for the link tree, which has all the platforms that the podcast on, along with social media platforms. Also a couple links for today's sponsor, Anchor. Shout out to Anchor. Been with us pretty much since day one.
Pretty close.
Link for the voice message. If you want to leave a message, we'll include it in the episode. And a link if you want to become a supporter of the podcast, throw a few bills at us, and we'll do whatever you want.
Yeah.
So,
that's
it. We're out, and we're going to see y'all on Friday.